Welcome to Refined Resilience. I'm your host, Carrie Hill, and on this podcast, we highlight the small moments that shape our journey toward greatness and remind us that resilience isn't linear. Each episode features stories of perseverance and the little victories that often go unnoticed, illustrating that resilience is about finding strength in everyday life. Well, I am so thrilled to have my friend AJ Rounds with me today. AJ is a founder of RevRoad, a venture services firm that infuses human capital into small companies, into large international firms, while also raising capital. Additionally, he's just launched Arlen Capital, a real estate investment fund. RevRoad now has 80 plus companies under their management and has generated over $1 billion in revenue. AJ is currently the owner of 3 other small businesses and a portfolio of real estate. He's a 2-time CMO, 5 times founder, 12 times board member, and he has experienced 3 exits. As someone who loves the sunshine, you will most likely find him outside hanging out with his 4 kids, wife, and dog. He also runs marathons, he bikes, he skis, he plays guitar, he drives a limousine, which tops the list of all of his favorite things to do. And basically, he's awesome. So, hi, AJ.
Hello. Well, that's too nice. Too much stuff, right? I'm just a regular guy.
Do you know what? I love sharing that with people, though, because it always reminds me of who my guest is and how much they've done and how full their life is. And so you have a really full life.
Yeah.
Yeah. Have you always been this ambitious person that wanted to, maximize life?
I guess that's a great question. I don't think about it like that very often, but my philosophy is we get one life. So we better make the best of it because we're not going to get another one, right? And I guess I have from the early days. I think about high school and I was constantly busy, and college, same thing. And then, you get into career and family and everything, and things just, I think for me, the biggest problem I have is FOMO. I do not want to miss out on something cool that's happening or some sort of amazing event or some sort of anything. And I'm like, I want to be there and be part of that. So I think it's a problem, actually.
Yeah, no, that's a beautiful problem to have. But speaking of that, I do love to see you so involved in our local business community here in Utah. And I know your talents and your gifts extend, past the borders of Utah. But I love that you're so active and people personally, and relationships are a huge part of your personal brand. And they've become a huge part of RevRoad. And I want to just dive in a little bit to your relationship skills and have you always been an extroverted person, and how did you engage with relationships when you were younger?
Yeah, great question. I was a little bit, I've never been introverted, right? And my wife's like, you say you're an introvert, but there's no way. You don't even resemble an introvert at any level, right?
You're just quiet sometimes.
But I do like my quiet. And I do like to be alone sometimes, right? To kind of recollect my thoughts and think about things. And I've always loved to just, go have fun and be part of the, what's happening, right? I feel like it's better to have a few close, tight relationships than a lot of superficial, maybe surface level relationships. So when I meet people, I like to go deep and understand who they are and why they love certain things and what they're hoping for, what their dreams are. I think, and I love Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People, which is a terrible title, by the way, but it's an amazing book.
But it worked somehow.
It's really good. And he said that the thing that's most important to people when you talk to them is, number one, their name. So always get their name right, which I don't always do. So that's a flaw that I have. Definitely I need to figure out and fix. But he said, and people love to talk about themselves. So whenever you meet someone, if you can get to know them first and let them go first about what they're doing, then naturally they want to turn the table and say, well, what about you? What are you doing? Yeah. And then it feels more natural, as opposed to when you meet people, oftentimes and this is not a critique, but I just noticed that people love to jump in and talk about what they're doing and how they're doing it and who they're doing it with. And I'm like, awesome. And then you go to the next conversation and oftentimes you'll forget to talk about even what you're doing, you know? And if you can flip that paradigm, it just makes everything feel more natural and people actually realize that you care, you know?
Yeah. Well, and they feel that you care too, right? That's a difference. You know, I think so many young entrepreneurs and founders growing up now, where they've been exposed to social media since birth, really. I think that's
which is sad for them, right?
Yes, I know. But it also is so weird to think that we are of a generation that wasn't even part of our childhood, you know? So, but for this generation of founders
phone, and
right?
Phones weren't a thing either.
Yeah, no, it was when you waited for the person to call you and you went into the washroom or the closet, like with your long cord, you know?
Pay phones, remember those quarters? You know, that was still a thing, right?
Yes, I love it. Now it's nostalgic, right? Or vintage or
antique, right?
Antique. Yeah. But I think the gift that you are able to give, having cultivated so many businesses over time and being the outgoing, extroverted person that you are, you set a really beautiful example for younger founders to pause and not be so anxious to just jump on the bandwagon and try to get support for what they're doing, but to have that more organic relationship. So when you mentor younger, absolutely. When you mentor younger founders and business owners, you know, what are some key things that you focus on for them that elevate their experience in networking and relationship building?
You know, it's a great question, right? And I think it varies case by case on who you're talking to, right? But what I try to tell founders is go get to know them and understand what's important to them before you make an ask, because sometimes you won't even make the ask if you realize they're way off in left field and it wouldn't really be helpful. Right. So I think that's important. The other thing I tell them too is if you are going to make an ask, which is fine, we're all in business, that's what we're here to do, right? Make sure it's clear and concise and actionable. There's nothing worse than being asked something and you're not sure what you were even asked, right? That feels terrible.
Yeah.
So I say, you know, get to know them, understand where they're coming from and what's important to them. And then if there's an ask that's appropriate, make sure that it's clear and concise and that it can be, again, acted upon very easily and it's small. Like some people ask for the world on their first encounter. I'm like, no. Build a relationship first, right? I love what Gary Vaynerchuk says. You know, Gary V. Isn't he amazing?
Yes, he's awesome.
He's kind of a potty mouth, but you know, if you can filter that, you know,
it comes with the territory where he grew up at, though, right? It's just who you are. and
this is brand, so you don't even hear it, right? But he always says his philosophy is jib, jib, jab, right? So jib. Give something of value, jib, give another thing of value, and then jab, go for the ask.
Right.
But don't ask before you've already given them value and given them something that's going to bless them or benefit them in some way. And I love that. And
sometimes that process takes more than just one conversation.
Exactly.
And I think that's a really important part to dial down too, is that it has to be an organic experience as well. We all know that we're trying to sell each other something or give each other something, but wow, it's more enjoyable to buy into it when there's a relationship there.
That's right.
You know, some commonalities.
And I think people, we all hate to be sold, but we love to buy.
Yeah.
So if you can help people feel like they're buying, by giving them something of value first, right? I think that's it's so much more real and authentic and lasts longer.
Yeah, absolutely. How do you feel, AJ, about collaborations in business, like businesses coming together to collaborate to maximize what their platforms are or their missions?
I think it's amazing.
Yeah.
Especially when it makes so much sense, right? We were just talking before the show about Scott Porter. Shout out to Scott Porter, San Diego Churros, right? I don't know of anyone that collaborates as well as Scott. Yeah. Like he's always collaborating with someone or partnering with someone because churros goes with everything.
Right.
We all love churros,
yes,
right?
Absolutely.
It's
yes.
the language of love, especially those sweet cream ones, right? And he just does it so well. And because of that, he's in all the events and he knows so many people. And, you know, you always see churros everywhere. And I love that example because that's helped his business grow so much better and more organically, you know? So
I'm a big fan of collaboration.
Yeah.
I am a big, I think
you're good at that, Carrie.
Oh, thank you.
You are.
I appreciate that. I love it. It feels, I always want someone to be a part of something organically that's helping me. So if I ever approach somebody, it's always with the intention of making whatever they're doing better? How can I help you make it better?
Yeah.
Right? And I'm not trying to sell you anything. I'm literally saying, how can me, Carrie, the person, help you make this even bigger and better?
Yes.
And let's be a part of that together, of growing something together.
That's it.
I think that's a really important component to being resilient. And we're here to talk really about components of resiliency, and personally and professionally in our lives. But I think collaboration is healing. I think it can be a very healing experience for entrepreneurs when you feel alone.
Mm-hmm.
You've been doing this for a long time by yourself, or a short time by yourself, and you feel alone. Right?
Yeah.
And I love that when you are in a space where you don't see necessarily a way forward, that just that outreach to your community that says, hey, I'm really going to be vulnerable right now and say, I don't have all the answers and I don't know how to do this.
Yeah.
Like, who else can come with me and help me?
Yeah.
So I want to hear a little bit from you, AJ, about what your experiences have been in collaboration. What's an example of where you use collaboration to really maximize something that you were stuck on?
Yeah, great question. I got to think through that a little bit. One thing that, just to go back 2 steps that you were talking about earlier, giving value, even if there's nothing in it for you, I think is such an important topic.
Agreed.
Right? At RevRoad, one of our hallmarks is that we hear thousands of pitches each year, right? And some are really good and most are really terrible, right? And so,
keep trying, guys.
That's right. And that's just it is, I think one of the hallmarks of RevRoad is we would never let anyone leave those doors of the conference room until we had given them some actionable value on here's how you change your pitch, or say it this way, or bring in this experience, or I would love to see a testimonial that says this. And that meant something to people. And that's why a lot of our companies they weren't ready for RevRoad at one time, but they were later on because they acted on that feedback. And so I think that maybe to go to your question with collaboration, when you collaborate with them and say, hey, listen, you're not ready now. And here's why, but you're very direct. I mean, you can tell anyone any news in love, right? And if it's given the right way, then it will help them in the long run. And those that listen and take it into account, their companies, they do better and they get further faster, really.
Yeah, so but being ready for that and being able to receive it in the spirit with which it was given is so significant. And I think sometimes when you've worked so hard to see something succeed and you're just not in that place to get positive critique, right? Positive feedback, it's just the most hurtful thing to hear that you're not ready for something when you put your heart and soul into it. And so I think part of that resiliency and collaboration is also being humble enough to realize that you don't have all the answers.
That's right.
That you have to have that feedback and someone has to give that to you.
It has to be given well and it has to be received well. Yeah. Right.
What's some of the hardest feedback that you've had that was hard for you to navigate through?
Wow, that is great. As you know, I've led teams of marketers for years and years. And one of my team members once told me, they're like, AJ, we think, it is so great to work with you because we worked with some tyrants and, micromanagers, and you never want to work with people like that.
Yeah, no thanks.
So I purposely tried not to be that person. But at times, because you are trying to be not everyone's friend, that's not it, but you're trying to be, someone that they can rely upon and trust and someone that's authentic. Maybe I wasn't always as clear in my directions as I could have been. So someone once gave me that, that feedback saying, hey, if you could be a little more clear and precise in what you need and when you need it by, that would help me personally. And so from that moment on, I'm like, that's what I'm going to do. So I'm very clear and direct in what I'm telling people and why. And that's another thing that I've been told is sometimes you're telling us that things need to happen, but what is the why behind it? And any employee wants to know that, whether they're part of those, boardroom conversations or not. They still want to know, well, here's what you're asking me to do, but why? What's going to be the benefit to the company and to me as to why we're doing that? So when I started incorporating that piece of feedback as well to explain the why behind everything, it made everything flow better, and everyone was more engaged and on the same page.
Yeah. And it made it easier for you.
That's right.
Than to get the result that you were looking for.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
So that's some of the feedback I've been given, and I've tried to take it to heart. I'm not perfect at it, but I've tried to take it to heart. To go back to your earlier question about what is a collab that has been interesting, that has gone well. I'm going to give a huge shout out to a couple people here.
Yeah, great.
So Squire, right, has been an amazing partner at Rev Road for a long time.
Yeah.
We appreciate Joe Hillstead and the entire team over there, right? They've just been fantastic. And then another collaboration or partnership that we've had for a long time at Rev Road is Central Bank. And they believed in us when no one else did, when Rev Road was still just kind of a thing, right? It's just an idea, really. Yeah. And they were our first institutional investor. And what's cool about that is for a long time, they kept believing in us and, helping us out and all these different things and sending us great, companies to work with. But we at one point decided to start our own podcast, and we did it internally. And for a lot of different reasons, I won't go into why, but it just didn't work. It fell flat.
Yeah.
And so when I met Jake McHarg at Central Bank, who was, newly heading up CB Vault, their entrepreneurial arm, we said, why don't we collaborate on a podcast? Because I was going to do another one and he wanted to do it. And I'm like, let's do it together, right? So bank and venture capital firm, not a typical partnership, right? But we put it together and it has been magic ever since. It's been so cool because he brings another flavor that I don't, and vice versa in our podcasts. And it's been great because, his audience and or network is going to be different than mine. So we built this together and, it's been a really fun ride. We're 130 plus episodes and, thousands and thousands of downloads, and it's been really, really fun.
How long ago was that?
We started in, I think it was April of 2022. So 2.5 years.
I want to tell you
2 years.
A thing that I have been trying to rack my brain around.
Let's hear it. Let's go. Let's solve it on the podcast right here.
It was this experience that I had. So I was at, I don't remember what the name of the French restaurant is that's attached to Guru's downtown in Provo. And there's a French pastry shop attached to it.
I can't think of it.
And I was there having lunch at some point, and there was this table next to me.
Le Petit. Is it Le Petit?
Yes. Yeah. And there was a table next to me with a group of men talking about the Midnight Founders podcast. And how cool is that? I actually stopped at the table on my way out and said, I think that's a really good idea. I really like that idea. Just, you didn't ask my opinion, but I was just here eavesdropping, and I love that idea. And they were like, great, thanks. And then they left. And I don't remember if you were part of that or who was in that group, but I've never forgotten the name Midnight Founders Podcast. So I kept racking my brain, and it just came to me right now while we were talking. Oh my gosh, I have this flashback. How fun. Well, so I just
that's going to happen in this podcast.
I want to just
people will just be talking about it, around the lunch table. It'll be great.
I just want to take all the credit for the success of your podcast.
Go for it.
So, but how fun is that? And I think that really speaks to the fact that our energies will find like energies no matter where they are. Our business energy will find each other. Our personal energies will find each other, So I really appreciate that story because it just shows me full circle at a time that I was actually going through some pretty big things in my personal life.
Which wasn't too long ago.
Yeah. And to be sitting here now with you and to have been a guest, on your podcast, and
amazing. It's coming out soon.
Full circle. Yeah. And thank you for that. But what a beautiful gift to sit in this space right now. I just wanted to feel that for a second.
Well, you're so amazing. I mean, all your guests are going to be just incredible on the show. So
thanks, AJ. Well, that includes you.
Thank you.
Speaking of that kind of full circle energy, I do want to talk to you about some personal experiences in your life and make you dig a little bit.
Sure.
To just share with me something in your life that was a struggle that you really wrestled with, that you really had to go through that grittiness, of emotion to get through.
Yeah.
And have seen that thing in your life come full circle somehow back to you.
Yeah.
In a positive way.
Actually, I have a really cool story. It's going to be kind of personal. So I'm going to try not to be emotional.
Okay. I love it.
when I was growing up, my dad was larger than life. He was the life of the party. When my friends would come over, they're like, "Hey, Jay, where's your dad?" Because he was so fun and engaging, and he had the greatest, stupidest, corniest father, dad jokes and all this stuff.
They're the best, aren't they?
Totally. He had it down to a science. Anyway, a great man. And I always thought growing up, he was quite, again, the leader. So he would always lead and guide and direct, and he had us, regimented, and it was kind of militant in my household. Loved it, lots of love, but it was very by the book, and we're gonna make sure certain things happen when and how, and there was a lot of control there. So the thought of ever losing either one of my parents, but especially him, was like probably one of my biggest fears, and or something that I probably felt like I could never handle. And then November 11th, 2008 happened. And he was out on a jog, just a nightly jog with my sister, my youngest sister, who was a senior in high school at the time. This was in Logan, Utah. And a distracted driver hit him. And we took him off life support 4 days later. He passed away. And thank you. In that moment, my mom called, and of course she's in shock and in tears, and he was life-flighted to McCady Hospital in Ogden. This happened again in Logan, Utah. And we kind of had that feeling as soon as it happened that we knew he probably wouldn't make it. And at that moment, you dig deep and you think, what am I capable of? Can I do this? Because at first I'm like, this is too much. This is too hard. We went through the funeral, and I'm the oldest, and so a lot of that falls, on of course my mom and myself, and my poor sister, just younger than me, was 8 months pregnant, and my other sister, she had multiple kids at the time, and then my youngest sister, who was with him, luckily was some sort of reflect in his hand, just like pushed her to the side, so she was spared.
Oh,
thankfully.
My goodness.
Yeah, some sort of fatherly, heroic thing there. But, and then my two brothers, one of them was in Argentina on an LDS mission, and then the other one was going through some of his own really difficult life challenges. So it kind of lands on, on those that are there to help out. Yeah. And you're not sure, like, how do I even do this? I had only been to a funeral once in my life prior to that. Yeah. So there's a lot of things to deal with when someone passes away. And I thought, this is too much. This is too heavy. And lots of time, lots of tears, and lots of things that go through your mind at that point. And I realized when it was all said and done that there's an inner strength in all of us. We can do hard things, harder than we think. Unfortunately, sometimes it takes a tragedy to bring those things out, but we all have a core in us that we can crush anything we want, even if it's the thing that scares you the most. So the full circle moment is, he's been gone now 16 years, just recently. We celebrated 16 years, and because he was so dynamic and had so many dreams and goals and aspirations and loved real estate, had real estate projects all over the country. I'm like, wouldn't that be cool, now that I'm taking a little bit of a step back from Rev Road, to name the fund after him? So his name was Arlen.
Oh, I love that. So
now the fund is called Arlen Capital.
Oh, how beautiful.
Yeah. And he would have loved it. And I hope that he's up there wherever he is, guiding our progress and our success, so that, what we're doing is something that he would have done had he been here.
Absolutely.
So there you go. There's the full circle story.
Well, I really appreciate that, because my brother, you've done some work with my brother. Shout out to Lawton Smith.
Shout out to Lawton. Yes. What a rock star. All the way from Spain.
Yes. All the way to Spain. But Lawton and I, and my other brother that lives here, and I've shared this a couple times with different guests on the show, but I feel like we all have a story of loss, and we lost my sister when she was 18 in a car accident. So and there is nothing that can prepare you for that kind of absence so abruptly, right. And you said so much of the responsibility of funeral preparation and taking care of your family during that time fell on your shoulders. And that was similar to me. I'm the oldest in my family as well. And
so you understand kind of where that
absolutely
goes. Yeah.
No, while you were talking, I was feeling that it's so easy to go back to that, and not in the painful parts, but just the parts that you can remember from that time. And
it's not to diminish what anyone else does, because everyone chips in.
That's right.
But you just feel this mantle of responsibility. Like, I got to make sure my family's okay. Yeah. Like it passes immediately to you as the oldest, doesn't it?
Yeah. And the fogginess that you go through that experience with, there's so much about that experience that I don't remember because the brain fog was just so prevalent,
the shock.
Yeah. And actually, Lawton, my two brothers had to actually go identify her because my parents were living in Germany at the time and they weren't here. And I mean, so I absolutely 100% feel that kind of loss. And, it's one thing to lose your parent, but to lose your child, I just can't even imagine. I look at my parents and they're such rock stars.
Devastating.
And I'm sure your mom is. Yeah. What kind of lessons of strength and resilience have you learned from her?
Oh, it's unbelievable. I mean, she has now gone on to finish degrees and, serve in her church and do a lot of really cool things, but she's living life on her terms and traveling a lot and taking care of the grandkids. And she's doing all the things that she loves, serving. And she does a lot of volunteer work at the hospital and things. And it goes to show me that, amidst incredible loss, some people are able to actually self-actualize, and it blesses other lives. And she, there's no question that she would give anything to have him back. But because she can't, and that's not a reality, she's made the best of it.
Yeah.
And she's been positive. It's so funny because everyone always asks me, they're like, where did this come from? Where did your personality come from? Like, well, maybe my business sense comes from my dad, but, and my entrepreneurial, aspirations, but, my positivity, I always tried to emulate that from my mom, because to know her is to love her, and to know her is to want to be her best friend, because she is positive in any situation.
Yeah.
And I'm not to that level, but she is just incredible. So she maintained her positivity throughout this entire ordeal. And it's one of those things, like, that there is a hole in your heart that will never be filled.
That's exactly what I said to Katie Bunnell, who I was on a segment with me from Live Your Dream Foundation. And she was talking about losing her spouse abruptly. Yeah. And I said, that exact same thing. It just gets smaller, but it never closes.
That's right. And time heals.
Yeah.
It'll never go away, but time makes it more bearable.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah.
But what I think is so cool is when people like Katie and others and yourself and some of the tragedies that you've gone through, especially with your sister, you move on.
Yeah.
And not that you ever forget them, but maybe some of the things you're doing that are really cool that you're proud of, maybe you're doing it in their honor.
Totally. Absolutely.
I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, I love the word positivity, and I love that you use that to describe, and you are a very positive person, but to describe that with your mom as
Sometimes my wife wouldn't say that all the time, but
I think there is this thing, there's a thing called toxic positivity, which is where you are in grief, you are going through something that's so deep, and somebody else just comes up and says to you, it'll be fine, the sun's shining,
they're in a better place.
Yeah.
Like, I do not want to hear that.
As much as they're trying to be that voice for you, it really has the opposite effect, because really what you want to do in that moment is what?
Just want to curl up and die.
Just want to curl up and hide.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think I'm always mindful of that term, toxic positivity, because I think there is
a really good point. I love that.
There's a realistic positivity that comes when you've been refined.
Yeah.
Right. And the name of this podcast is Refined Resilience, right? But it's a double meaning, right? You have to refine it, but you also have to be refined through resilience. That's how that happens.
Well, and I think too, Carrie, and I love the title of your podcast, because it is a refinement that we're all going through. And as we get refined, we become more resilient, and I love that. What I learned is, when people go through hard things like that, whether it's a death or divorce or a financial catastrophe or whatever, right? There's so many things we could pick from, right? That we don't even choose. It just happens sometimes, right? what I think is interesting is, or what I think is helpful, is we have an increased sense of empathy to know exactly what that person is going through. Like you just had just a minute ago, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And you actually feel, you have it because you feel it again. It comes up organically. Yeah.
And the way you show up for someone that's going through that, and what I found is true, is I love when people, even to this day, say, you know what, I have this really cool memory of your dad. Can I share it with you?
I love that.
Because then it helps you realize he is not forgotten.
That's right.
And he had impact on other people's lives. And I think even in the moments of those devastating trials, just to say, hey, I have a great memory about this person. Can I share it with you? That just like makes everything so much better.
Yeah. Oh, I appreciate that so much, because correlated to that is this idea that it's resiliency in my mind. And I'd love to hear what your actual definition of resiliency is. But for me, it takes on so many different meanings depending on where I'm at and what I'm doing and what the situation is, right? But I think overall, resiliency for me is this it's a deep understanding of that empathy. It's a deep understanding of knowing what you're going through, and not just offering this surface positivity, but to actually know that you can be deeply positive while you're grieving, while you're experiencing, some incredible trauma. And it's such an interesting feeling. I don't know about you, but it's such an interesting feeling to be in deep grief, but also know that there's so many joyful things in your life at the same time.
Yeah.
And for me, that's resiliency really, is that the joy is heartfelt. It's in you. It's part of your DNA now.
Yeah.
While you're going through this very difficult time.
I completely agree. I think what I would say in response to that is sometimes, like I know a lot of people get caught up with, I don't know what to say. I don't know what to do in those moments, right?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
And sometimes it's just enough to just go be with that person.
Yes.
And for them to know that you've gone through the same thing. So for example, I had a really impactful, really special experience. I serve a lot with a lot of the youth in my neighborhood, a lot of specifically the young men that are trying to, grow up to be great husbands and fathers and wonderful people, right? And I love working with them because, that's really where you make the real difference, right? Is the rising generation. And this one young man in my neighborhood, he unfortunately lost his father as well to a tragic, it wasn't even an accident, it was just an aneurysm. And he was there one second and gone the next, so just no time to say goodbye or anything, right? Yeah. And I remember seeing his truck out in the driveway because he lives really close to my house, and I could see him in the truck, and it was just idling and the lights were off, but I could see him there. And I don't know what got into me, but I went up to the door, and I won't use his name, but I said, hey, what are you doing? What's up? What's going on? It was like midnight. And he's like, I'm just missing my dad. And I was like, gosh, I get that, Do you want some company? And he's like, sure. And we just sat there in silence in his truck for like an hour and just sat there and just kind of we were in our own thoughts and and we said a few things, but it was just, I think for him to have someone just there that kind of knew and understood, that changed everything, you know? And he was going through a rough time. And, from that point on, it wasn't because of that, I'm sure, but from that point on, he really kind of changed his life trajectory to a much more positive trajectory. Right. And I just think that sometimes people just need to know that they're not alone, like you said.
The power of one.
It really is. And I think founders and owners of businesses, it's very lonely at the top. They need that as well. Just someone to just sit there with them sometimes and just say, let's just be here for a minute. Just together.
And the credibility that you built with that young man was that you knew deeply, personally, what that experience was like. And so, having that positivity, that positive voice, if you will, or even just an empathetic voice, right? Which can be so positive.
One of experience, right?
I think from coming from somebody else who really truly does understand what you're going through, that makes all the difference in the world. It's a trusted source.
I think you're right. And then I think the next part of resiliency is to be able to share when it's time, not probably in the moment, but share later to others how you learn to be resilient and how they can be resilient too. Because it does no good if you're resilient and you've learned that built that muscle, if you will. Right. and then no one hears about it or no one even experiences that or feels that, you know?
Yeah. Before we came on, AJ, we were talking a little bit about, just to come back to the business side of things a little bit more.
Yeah.
By the way, thank you so much for sharing.
Of course. I'm so sorry.
No, I never apologize. Never apologize for that. You know, we have generations of apologies for men tapping into and it's not even tapping into it. You just are human, you know? So the natural response to grief is tears.
Oh, for sure.
You know, it's just for anybody. And so I never want to hear men apologize for being, so for being who they are, as humans. But, you know, so coming back to this kind of, conversation about resiliency and being ready, right? That young man that you just talked to he was ready for someone because he received it. Yeah. And I think when you're not ready, but somebody is trying to push you into a resilient pathway and you're just not there yet, it's so frustrating, and it can have the other path. It doesn't work.
It's worse.
Yeah. And I think sometimes when you're a founder or you're an entrepreneur and you have been burned and you know some of these experiences intimately as well, you know, in business, that is a loss. It's an intense loss when things don't go the way that you want them to, like we were saying earlier, and you put your heart and soul into that space. And I'd love to hear for you, from you, AJ, how do you deal with those really deep business partnerships, relationships, or goals, or, you know, anything that you have your heart into? How do you deal with those losses as you build your brand?
Are you talking when you eventually have to separate ways?
Yeah, or just even as you're trying to grow together, because even as you're trying to grow together, you're going to have differences. You're going to experience, I hate that word failure, but we're going to say that because it's an industry term, right? So when you experience failure and you're trying to grow your brand, all the way up to the chain where maybe you are now ending things with your partner, you know, what has been staples for you that you can pull from that can help others go through that experience?
Yeah, great question. I think honestly, I mean, it again, it's kind of case by case, you know, lots of situations different. I had one business partner that was literally doing some illegal, unethical things and, you know, stealing money and all the things you hear about that are nightmares.
Oh my gosh.
And in that case, it's like, listen, I got to call the authorities and you're going to have to serve some time.
Wow. AJ, wow, though.
Yeah. That's
to tough. Be that partner and tough. Find that and have to make that call.
Yeah.
How did you come out of that? Because that's devastating. The betrayal of that is devastating.
It is horrible.
Yeah.
And then you think about what that does to that person's family as well. I mean, that's what's really hard, right? But you have to think about that as like, listen, I don't want this to happen to someone else. So we need to take the right steps so that it can't happen to someone else. And then of course you sever ties and you go back to all your clients and your customers and say, listen, this is what happened. I think you need to be very transparent and very open and make sure that you are giving them all the facts that you have. Oftentimes you don't have all the information, but when those things happen, then that's a little different story.
Yeah, that's an extreme.
Yeah.
I mean, but it happens so much more frequently than we think it happens, you know? Yeah. So I think it's an important, not to plant that seed that your business partner is going to betray you, but it's important to understand that things happen. People make different decisions when they're in desperation, you know, and so just be prepared for how you can respond to that. I think that's a really significant part of this journey of resiliency is being prepared.
I think so too. And I think the other thing, Carrie, that you have to remember as business partners is hopefully you've you know, self-selected to work together because you have a skill set and they have a skill set. And oftentimes when you start to second guess them and or vice versa, that creates tension and problems. So I think you have to really remember, first and foremost, trust. I mean, you trust this person. It may not be the way you would do it, but you trust them that they will do the right thing based on their knowledge and experience. And then sometimes you need to verify as well on the back end, but you have that trust. And what I find is when relationships get a little bit rocky, especially with business partners and or founders, is you kind of have to take a little bit of a trip down memory lane and be like, remember when we did this, or remember when we made this decision, or remember when we just didn't know what to do in this circumstance and we figured it out. And then it's kind of like a marriage. Then you can start to remember the good times and the things, the successes you have had, and it helps you go forward if need be. So.
Boy, that is so significant. You know, you always hear that exercise in marriage to like, just stop and go back to when you first met each other and when, you know, what was your first date like? And, but I think even in personal loss for my sister, and maybe you have a similar ritual or, you know, experience, but we always celebrate her birthday every year, you know, and we have ice cream all together on her birthday and celebrate that. Awesome. And so, but that speaks to going back to those beautiful moments, the things that were alive, that were gorgeous and that were positive in your life. And so, so I think that's a great gift to give to business partners that are just up and coming is go back and celebrate the things that have been good,
right?
And reset, you know? Yeah.
And then I think along with that, you have to be upfront and transparent and honest in all you do. And the other thing I see that a lot of business partners don't do that they need to is you just got to keep everyone honest and make sure everything is in writing. I don't care if it's your roommate or your best friend or someone that you grew up with, whatever, it doesn't matter. Like you need to have everything in writing the right way because when you don't, things will totally blow up. Like things are usually fine when there's no money around and you're building. But when there is money, everything changes.
Yeah, it gets real sticky.
That's right.
After that. Yeah.
So put it in writing. And that's not a distrust. In fact, that's an opposite. It's a trust thing that you're both trusting
each other. It's a kindness.
That's right.
Yeah, let's give each other kindness by taking care of each other in this space. I think so much to speak to that, so much of being able to be resilient is that honesty and that transparency. Like we're set up to be resilient.
Right.
We're
I think
good.
That's right.
Yeah.
We are. We can be tough if we need to be.
Yeah.
And we don't see that enough. You know?
Right.
In fact, I don't mean to cut you off.
No,
you had
please
a thought.
Go ahead.
But I think that oftentimes, and I'm not trying to be overgeneralize here, but I think that we need to with the younger generations, with the Gen Zs and others, I think we need to create hard situations that they can work through because I don't think there's enough hard things going on in their lives to where they do find that they build that resiliency muscle. Right.
Yeah.
And so when things do get hard, they're not sure how to respond. So we see these huge, numbers in, mental, challenges and
anxiety and depression
depression and
support animals,
and self-hate,
and crayons and coloring. I mean, we try to supplement for the lack of, technique in being able to be resilient.
But I think, and I'm not trying to, again, minimize this at all, because, there is, pharmaceuticals and things have their place if there really is some, chemical imbalances, but to put them in hard situations, and have them, like, sports are amazing for that reason, right? Or, having a really hard challenge that they have to figure out, I don't know if it's a 50-miler backpack hike or running a half marathon or whatever the case may be, for them to do those hard things and see success, it builds that inner confidence so they can go do it again.
Yes.
And if they've never had it, we're doing them a disservice.
Yeah. And also not everyone wins a trophy.
That's right.
Like this is just the world we live in. Right. And so, part of resiliency is understanding someone's going to be always at a disadvantage or on the losing side, if you will. Right.
And to lose is not the end.
And it's not the end.
You learn.
No, it's so important because, just like a coach would do, like, let's go look at the game footage. Let's see like what we did wrong and what we can fix in the future. But I think taking some of those parameters that you mentioned earlier about making sure you have things in writing, making sure that you're transparent and honest, these are safety devices for you to implement so that you can move through that struggle if it comes in a much more resilient space. And so I think, setting some of those parameters up personally, how do we personally, we have our pillars that we go to, that we can pull from and to be more resilient people individually. And we do the same thing in business. There's no difference.
Absolutely.
So I love that. AJ, it has been so fun to talk with you. We could talk, we really could. We could talk for a long time, you and I. I have so much respect for you.
Thank you.
there
Likewise.
is never anything negative said around the name of AJ Rounds. I just want you to know that people have an immense amount of respect. And I think you are a bright light in the business world. And I think you bring a lot of hope to up and comers, and even to people that have been veterans, seasoned veterans. I think you just are a resilient person.
I appreciate
and
that.
That's an infectious energy, and I love it. So it's been so fun to sit and chat with you.
Likewise.
Yeah.
Very good luck with your podcast.
Well,
it's so fun.
Thank you. Well, before we go, I want people to know about the new real estate.
Yes.
So Arlen Capital Fund. So tell us all about that and where we can find information out about that.
Yeah, this is so fun. So now that we have a fantastic executive team in place at Rev Road, which we've been working hard to curate over the last couple of years, some of us founders are able to take a little bit of a step back and do some other things, right? And Rev Road will keep growing and flourishing, and that's so exciting to see and so liberating. I mean, I think all business owners need to put that in their early plans. Is here's kind of our succession plan, because companies, just to kind of take a pause on this note, the founding team is typically different than the growth team, which is typically different than the scaling team for businesses. And oftentimes founders will try to take them all the way through. And that's when companies don't do as well, typically. There are a few exceptions like Elon Musk. We all know him, and Bill Gates, right? They can do it all.
The big hitters.
That's right. But most of the time, the different teams will take companies to different levels at different times. And that's how it's supposed to be. So it's almost like going back to your earlier statement, to separate you are not your business, to separate yourself from your business. You are your person. You are you, and you are not the business. And when people confuse that, it just really creates havoc later on with their lives. So now I'm in this really fun space where I get to decide, what is my passion? What do I want? What's the next problem to go solve? We solved the problem of businesses failing too fast in the VC space. So what's next? And what I realized is, and a lot of our political leaders are talking about it on a national level and on a state level, and even on a city level, but there is not enough starter homes or affordable housing for folks like your kids, my kids.
Yes, absolutely. To me,
to anyone. They can't buy a home right now, and even if they could, there's not a lot available.
Right.
So I didn't see there's a lot of rhetoric about it, but there's not a lot of solution-based conversation. So I'm like, let me find someone who's solving this problem now and join forces with them. So there's a couple developers, shout out to Union Capital up in Heber and Lone Tree in Springville. We've joined forces.
Very cool.
They're already doing this and solving these problems in so many ways about how to build affordable housing and truly make it affordable. Not here in Utah, unfortunately. This is more in the Midwest and the Southwest, but they're doing it on a scale that's just awesome. But they're not. They feel like they're not going fast enough because money is constraining.
Sure.
So I'm like, well, let's just take what I've learned at Rev Road and raising a fund, and let's with all of us, that wasn't me. We all did it, but let's take some of those skills and principles and let's apply them to real estate and raise a fund so that we can get these homes built quicker and faster and get people in homes that that have looked for that American dream for a long time.
Thank you for doing that. I will just simply say that having adult children still living in my home right now to try to save money and try to figure out how they're going to move forward in their life, this is a huge problem to undertake. And unfortunately, I think the demand is growing much faster than the availability.
Especially with COVID and with interest rates going up, there's just no one building in this space.
So thank you. A theme that I've seen with so many people on my podcast is that there are so many beautiful advocates in this state that just say, there's a problem and I'm going to step in and fix it. And I love that grit and that can-do, energy.
Resiliency.
And so, yes, that resiliency. So I just want to say thank you and recognize the fact that you're trying to solve a problem that is a generational, potentially a long-term generational issue, and because it currently is now, so thanks for putting a lens on this and using your creative energy and your collaborations to create a solution. I think it's just what a great example of advocacy and just solving the problems.
It's going to be a ride. It always is.
Good job, AJ. I'm so proud to know you.
Thanks.
Yeah. Hey, thank you so much. Where can we find you on social?
Yeah, I'm active on LinkedIn, becoming a little more active on X, because that seems to be changing the world right now, right? And then you can always find me at either revroad.com or Arlyn Capital, ARLYN capital.com.
Awesome. Yeah. Okay, amazing. Well, everybody, please go and check out AJ across his social media platforms, contribute to what he's doing in some capacity, and learn more about RevRoad and Arlyn Capital Fund. Thank you so much, AJ.
Thanks, Carrie. Take care.
Thanks.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Refined Resilience. We hope you found inspiration in the stories shared and the small moments that remind us all of our strength. Remember, resilience is built not just in the big challenges we face, but in the everyday experiences that shape who we are. A special thanks to our sponsor, Build Then Bless, for making Refined Resilience possible. Until next time, remember, it's the small moments of resilience that make us great.